Welcome back to AI, the podcast, where we cut through the hype and have honest conversations about how artificial intelligence is actually impacting businesses today. I'm Virginia Hewling,
And I'm David Maples.
and it is the week of May 4th. And before we get into today's news, David, I just want to kick off. I want to clue the audience into a conversation that we had the other day, kind of talking about the general landscape of things. And we wanted to address the elephant in the room, the growing backlash against AI. For our audience, we want to make one thing crystal clear right out the gate. This show is stubbornly human centric. We care about the people who manage the businesses, who run the businesses, who work in the businesses, not just the algorithms.
You know, it's interesting you say that because just last week we saw Jeff Dean, who's one of the Google chief architect at Google DeepMind. He got booed off stage at UC Berkeley for Gemini's participation in what's going on in Gaza and the technology being used there. And we're starting to see these ripples kind of surface in society. So I, I've been thinking about the show a lot over the past week, and as a systems architect and an IP attorney, my job isn't just to be a hype pitch man for the next new AI technology. I'm very pro tech. I think there's ways to use it in your business, but ultimately, my job is to help you in this podcast build structures, um, that help protect your ideas, your data, and your people. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it is about the people. Everything else is irrelevant. But right now, in May of 2026, the landscape is shifting, and not just shifting a little bit; it's shifting aggressively and fast. Big tech and government regulators are rewriting the rules in real time to serve only themselves. And if you aren't paying attention, it's the human-run businesses that are gonna get squeezed and run over.
Exactly. And today we're going to take a look at this massive kind of geopolitical chess game that's happening right over our heads. It's kind of wild. It's like history in real time. What are things going to look like 100 years from now when they look back on this time period and remark on these things? So, diving deep into it, we're going to cover why the price of enterprise AI is about to skyrocket, even while the models themselves are being commoditized by open source. We're going to look at how new US security regulations are actually a trap called regulatory capture. And we're going to explore the very real threat of foreign open source models acting as Trojan horses.
It's actually a lot of noise, and as someone who kinda lives and breathes what's happening in technology every single week, um, the amount of information coming out right now is not just drinking from a fire hose, it's dizzying. And what our goal on this pod is to connect the dots back for you and to you to show you how you belong in this architecture. The technology is just the plumbing. The human beings are the asset. Let me repeat that. Technology is just the plumbing. The human beings are the important, critical point at the center of all this. And our goal today is to give you strategy to navigate these global shifts without losing that real, authentic human connection that your clients actually pay you for. So, with that, let's dive right in. So, one of the big things that's happened is that it just came out a couple days ago that the Trump administration is considering mandatory vetting, pre release vetting for new AI models before they get released. So, the thing that's really interesting about this is that this is all kind of under the guise or the rubric, so to speak, of Claude's Mythos model. It's like, oh, it's too dangerous. Nobody can have it. And now the government's stepping in a way at the behest, it seems, of the people who might benefit from it the most, um, of these big AI companies. When I say that, I mean the very big AI companies, the ones who are talking about doing IPOs this year that might value them at $1 trillion when they're still negative in revenue.
What's going on here is the companies that are building the AI models and releasing the AI models and trying to build an infrastructure to profit on the AI models are now asking the government to step in and vet the AI models before they're being released. You said something about a year ago. I think you looked at me and you were kind of like, "Oh my god, there's no more moat." It was like once you figured out like the kind of stuff that you could do with the models that were being released at the time, you skipped ahead and saw that everything kind of watered down to every people being able to get access to these models. So now are they trying to artificially create a moat so that there's more competition?
They're not trying to create a moat, they're trying to build a wall, and a wall that you have to pay for access to get through. There's a gate, and they will manage that gate and make sure that you have to have several billions of dollars to get through that gate. So, it's a
Okay.
we yeah,
So boil that down for me. Okay. So we've got enterprise level businesses that are obviously going to be utilizing this. Like I'm sure Salesforce is going to somehow rope this into their system. I'm sure
sure.
they're currently working on that right now. But what is that how does this boil down to mid-level companies and small businesses? What does this mean for the rest of us?
Okay. So, two things. As the big players go, so the enterprise companies follow. So, if the United States government says we saw this happen, I say we, historically, people saw this with the Federal Communications Commission, with radio, TV, all those things. We saw it with the railroads. This thing, regulatory capture is a way for a company to artificially build walls, or a moat rather, is the thing you have to cross to get in the castle, um, that artificially protects your industry when you don't have any other way to do it. So what's happening here is that if AI is becoming commoditized, and it is going to cost an incredible amount of money to run these next generation models. Now, which by the way, are not 10 times better. They're 20% better. They're 30% better. But how can I make you pay $1 trillion for those models when they're only, I'm not going to say marginally, they are better, I think, for certain activities. But how many PhD level scholars do you need going through your email box for you, right? Do you really need to be running that on your email? Or could you just use the plucky high school intern to go through your email box? I submit to you that one of those is probably okay. Now, boiling this down for people. So here's the way it works. It's textbook. Like if you go look up the definition of regulatory capture and the Encyclopedia Dictionary, Wikipedia, whatever, you will see a picture of Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, Sundar Pichai, and Satya Nadella all sitting in a room with their gold statues being presented to the Trump administration. And that's exactly what you would be doing. So by working with the government to set astronomically expensive security standards, Microsoft and Google in particular are legislating their cheaper open source competitors out of the market. So follow me. The government says these are the only models that the United States federal government is allowed to use. If you're working with the federal government, which most of these large corporations, enterprise level corporations do, you are only allowed to use certain models. And what you've done is you've said, look, it's like the idea. Let me boil this down. If you build an automobile factory, the moat is real. It costs you $10 billion to build a factory. Okay. You can't just be the plucky wannabe person. It's like, I've always wanted to build a car company. I can't go out tomorrow and pour my own apron and get the regulation for it and have the factory for $35. I mean, that's what I saved up, right? Isn't that enough? Um, but the challenge with it is that if you've got these open source models, and most of them, the leading open source models are coming out of China right now, which are pretty good. I run swarms of these to run agentic tasks right now.
Yeah, and we're going to tackle that. We're going to tackle that one in a minute.
Okay. But the point about it is that if the government says, and by the way, the VCs in Silicon Valley are talking about this right now because the VCs want to get in on this $1 trillion data center action, right? They would love for OpenAI and these big enterprise companies to have that moat because it means they're going to make their billions on the back end. Once the models become government stamped, they become the default for corporate America, and it creates massive vendor lock in. For example, imagine that we said in the railroad industry And they did it through pricing back then. But what if I told you you could only carry your oil or your dry goods to market if you were on this particular train that was run by OpenAI? And it cost $1,000 per ton of whatever it was. This is the classic play, right? And you're like, but we don't need that. I've got this other train and it costs $10 a ton. And you're like, oh, no, 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 can't use that. It's going to a government warehouse, can't do that. So the idea with this for business owners, and I've really been on my other podcast, The Buck Stops Here. I have a whole episode where I talk a lot about these challenges or problems.
Okay, well, wait, because I do want to address something. Like to play devil's advocate,
Sure,
y- Mythos was kind of the catalyst for this, and I think for good reason. I think
negative. I don't buy that for one
okay,
second.
okay, hold on. Let's just address it though, so we get the opportunity to discuss it. What is being presented is that Mythos, I think, scared enough people that
Yes.
somebody presented, this is why we need this kind of regulatory setup and this kind of review. And I think a lot of common sense people would look at that and go, yeah, that makes sense. So you are saying, David, you are making a claim that the timing may be coincidental, but maybe it's just a cover?
The private conversations in Silicon Valley for the past 6 to 8 months, after they got rid over the bubble scare, so when you had Opus 4.5 get released in, I think, December, right? They said, "Okay, maybe it's not a bubble. Maybe." I mean, you look at, Anthropic is now the fastest growing company in the history of capitalism. They now have $40 billion average recurring revenue. They have literally, from, 5 months ago, I think they were at, like, 2. No company has ever made so much money. By the way, they're still losing money. That's kind of funny, right? But no company's ever done that fast. So the rumor has been in Silicon Valley, like the unspoken thing they say behind closed doors is we need to find regulatory capture because when DeepSeek came out in January of 2025, everybody said, oh man, it's going to eat our lunch. They're only 3 to 6 months behind us. And China's going to keep releasing these open source models because they don't have the chips and the technology to run, they don't have the resources to run the very, very best inference models, but they've made a really decent Chinese knockoff in Quinn. Alibaba's models are great. I'm currently running Quinn 3. I'm also running Gemma 4, which is the Google model on local silicon, which doesn't cost me a $250,000. I can run this really nicely on a $10,000 rig. Here's the point is that in politics, there's a line never waste a crisis. Mythos created a crisis of opportunity, which the AI companies were more than happy to slot in and fill. That is what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist on this, but I mean, it just maybe it was just coincidental timing, but they sure have taken advantage of it. And what we're looking at now is think about how the script got flipped. The Trump administration said no regulation on the AI companies at all. And then even Dario asked for like, a while back, he's like, I'd like you to regulate us. I said, I think they may be left out in the cold by this a little bit. We'll see what happens. But
Yeah, I think they already got a black mark on themselves.
well, it's very interesting. The Trump administration is like no regulation on AI, no state-bound regulation, executive order from Trump a year ago, and they basically rescinded all of the Biden administration era rules. Basically, what I think the takeaway I would like to say is somebody who's building these systems that you as audience, me talk you, speak good now. What I'd like to say to the audience members right now is that you cannot blindly pump your client data. There's a few things here. I think you cannot blindly pump your client data into systems that are going to be intertwined with the federal government. I think there are going to be challenges with that. You're going to have to build a local middleware vault. You're going to have to scrub. You're going to have to anonymize. You're going to have to redact all proprietary information locally
Why is that?
because if it's going into government databases, the NSA is using Mythos right now to check the security of all their own systems. I'm not trying to say they're hacking United States companies, but they're hacking
We're
United States.
not, and we're not.
Okay. I'm sorry. We're not going to say that they're hacking United States companies. I'm not saying, okay, let me try this a different way. I'm not saying the NSA is hacking United States companies. But reasonable minds could think differently.
There's a really great film called Sneakers that I think everybody needs to watch.
Oh man, that is a
It checks out.
that's a blast from the past. I guess we should. Okay, so we're gonna have a movie watch list, which was gonna scare everybody. But the idea with it is that who watches the watchers. But the whole reason about it is that you need to make sure you're protecting your intellectual property because once it goes out that door into somebody else's database, how do you get it back? It's really hard to lock the barn door after the horses have already gotten out. And I think that's a really important thing. I also think for business owners, you need to think really hard about making your systems agnostic. Um, and we're gonna talk about that because you even mentioned that the price on these systems is going to skyrocket. Did you say we were going to talk about that?
I'm gonna go ahead and use this and roll into our next segment because what's interesting is everything that we just talked about gets followed up with major tech giants such as Google and OpenAI and Anthropic have all formally agreed to share their models with the US government for security reviews and trying to fall in line with this new regulatory framework. So this kind of consolidation of this relationship between federal regulators and big tech kind of sets a national standard for what constitutes a safe model, quote unquote. But like you were saying earlier, this really looks like textbook regulatory capture. And for those of you guys like, look, man, there's a lot of business terms that get thrown around. If you don't know what something is, don't stress over it. We will try to, we'll try to throw in a note there, but look it up. And if you have questions, hit us up with it. We love having conversations about this stuff. So, for those of you who are listening and aren't familiar with this, regulatory capture is it's an economic and political concept where a government agency is created to protect the public interests, and that government agency ends up being controlled or at least very heavily influenced by the very industry that it is supposed to be regulating. So instead of acting for the benefit of society, like ensuring fair prices or safety or competition, that captured agency acts in a way that benefits the major players in that specific industry. But I think that it's really interesting that now the biggest players are working directly with the government. So this threads right into everything you were just saying, David.
I I think there's a few things that came out. I listened to another pod last week. I think it was like This Week in AI or This Day in AI. I don't remember which one it was, but they were talking about, I think the title of the podcast was The Week That AI Grew Up. Now, we're not talking about these individual things, but we saw pricing. We've been seeing kind of the canary in the coal mine, for lack of a better term, for weeks now. These massive data center build outs. Each gigawatt of capacity of data center build out costs $50 billion, and they're talking about like $1 trillion. Adding 10 to 20 gigawatts of um, pricing into the market. And here's the crazy part: the economy's doing okay right now, but this is all in the back of this data infrastructure build out. If you look at all the things last week, Google, Meta, AWS, Amazon, Microsoft, they all beat expectations on Wall Street. Like, and how? The entire Walmart, no, sorry, the entire all the stocks on Wall Street are being carried by the Mag 10. These tech bro consolidated, companies right now that want to control everything. And overall, that's showing up in your 401ks and all these other things. And what's happening right now is that there's a price hike that's coming. And I'm going to explain the paradox. Okay. So the models are getting cheaper and more commoditized by the open source community. So for taking a model like Gemma 4 or Quinn 3, these models run on smaller machines and have better capability than the Llama 70B models from a couple of years ago. So what we've got is a smaller model that you can run on one of your home computers now, and or a pretty good gaming machine. I'm not going to say a home computer. It's a pretty good gaming rig. maybe it's a $5,000 machine, something like that. You can run a pretty good model that beats a 70 billion parameter model with like 26 billion. Okay, that being said, so that means on the low end, a lot of this stuff is being commoditized. It's like you're not selling gold plated toilet paper. You now have toilet paper and it's cheap. But what's happening is but what's happening on the other end of things, the very, very best models, which you want to use for all the most important things, cancer research, science, cutting edge, basically ChatGPT 5.5 and Claude Opus 4.7 are the models really at the top end of all these things. And they're expensive. We saw Microsoft take Opus out of GitHub last week. Overall, it looks like the increases to actually GitHub on June 1st, I believe, that's owned by Microsoft, by the way. It's a big software repository that all programmers use, is moving from a subscription based model to a usage based model. They're all moving to usage based. And it looks like the pricing is going to go up by a factor of 7 to up to 27 times because we have these agents that are running and spending a lot of money on tokens. So, what we're paying for is you're not paying for superior intelligence anymore. You're paying for this the idea with it is that you'll be paying for this regulatory compliance stamp and the cloud hosting to support these $1 trillion data center build outs. This is going to happen. On the low end, all of the startups in Silicon Valley are trying to replace the big expensive models in their software right now with a competent open source model that's made out of China. Because here's the thing, if I'm selling, just follow me, if I'm downstream and I'm building a piece of software for $20 a month. It's a new podcast hosting platform or something like that that uses AI for something you're doing. Um, Maybe working on something like that. Who knows? You don't want to be wed to a model. If you sold it to your clients for 20 bucks or 50 bucks a month, you don't want to be wed to running on Claude Opus or GPT if all of a sudden for that $50 thing you're selling to your client, it's going to cost you $500 a month or $200 a month or 100 because if you don't have venture capital money, which has been subsidizing the heck out of all of the big models right now, you can't afford it. You can't afford to go backwards. Most small businesses can't say, I'm $1 million a year company, but I'll take a $500,000 loss for the next 5 years. They're out of business in year one. So all the people building on this are moving to a lot of these competent Chinese models for the very best work. And the idea is, how do you orchestrate things? Now, if that is the way things are going, then all of this open AI stuff eventually would go to zero. All of that. And then how do you support your big data center that you have to build out that's going to cost $500 billion? And the answer is make the government require that you use those models.
Hmm. I have heard um, things being tossed around about having big tech like build their own power sources for the data centers. Um, this is all like this is all incredibly complicated, and you're having to look at this from like a 30,000 view at the same time this is kind of happening on the ground. So while you're talking about big tech running everything through a seemingly welcome vetting process, that's going to be creating scenarios where you've got open source models. Well, are open source models now illegal? Or are they just kind of like rogue AIs?
Nobody knows.
Okay.
I mean,
Well,
by the way, no laws have been passed. No executive orders yet have had this happen. But if I were a betting man, I would bet it's coming.
well, I know open source for years has been a thorn in the side of enterprise because it allows access to usually pretty darn good working tech. It's been
Oh,
put
it's
through
great.
Yeah, it's been put through its paces by the community. People love it and continue to develop on it. And it's a pretty solid backbone for a lot of things. I mean, WordPress itself is open source and has been running the internet for years.
Here's a secret that not a lot of people know. The internet is run entirely on a backbone of Linux. The funny thing about it is, years ago, one of the jokes about Microsoft Windows was If it were a Linux box, you could drive your car a million miles before you got an oil change. But you know what you have to do if you run a Windows machine? You occasionally stop on the side of the road, you break down, and have to drop in a whole brand new engine just to make it to the next bus stop. And that is the difference. But Microsoft sold themselves to enterprise as the default solution.
It's a nerd humor right there, ladies and gents.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, although that does bring up an interesting thing. I did see something about people about Linux
Yeah.
um having like a massive security hole people were freaking out about. That is not part of our set of articles, so I don't want to dive into it too much, but
What security hole are you talking about? The OpenBSD thing that Mythos found?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, look,
I don't know. I haven't looked into it to see if that's just a bunch of like, the sky is falling hype or what, but it just it was
here's the answer. There are security holes in Linux, um, but there's always been there. I think you might be talking about um, the copy fail vulnerability. But patches have already been released. The thing about Linux is that it's open source, and these things, when they're found, get patched really, really, really quickly. And it's really, it's one of these things. So if you haven't patched your system, look up the copy fail uh, liability and patch your systems. And it's just a logic error in Linux cryptography layer, I think is what it's in. But it's okay. And you will patch this. But apparently, it's been in the Linux kernel for years. I guarantee you, there's stuff like that in Microsoft.
Oh, sure. No, oh, I'm sure. And I think that's why Mythos was such a frightening thing for so many people. It was like the Y2K of like, "Oh my god, now we can see all of the vulnerabilities that nobody knew about." It's like putting on those glasses from They Live. And it just I think it got people rattled. So we're seeing the ripple effects from that. So in continuing the story, with US government policy and big tech, OpenAI is at it again. They're out here lobbying for restrictions on um, the People's Republic of China produced models like DeepSeek. And they are trying to have them classified as state controlled security threats. So, again, talking about this open source, like, let's get rid of problem competition. If OpenAI can get an open source model labeled as a security threat, what does that do to people who are using it currently and accessing it?
I want to acknowledge something as an architect. There is a real danger of this. We do know that some of these models, like the Quinn model, um, and some of these others, definitely have biases baked in the system, which all the models do. But they're kind of pro Chinese, and there's reasons for that. But here's the beauty of an open source model. When an open source model and open weights are put out there, you have all the source code. You can immediately, like, it's not like just a Trojan horse that just shows up on your doorstep. You can literally take that horse apart and find out there are guys inside it waiting to jump out when you go to bed at night. So what developers have done is they've immediately downloaded these foreign models, they tear out the guardrails, and they release uncensored variants. It's not about being edgy or anything else that try to make the model do something it doesn't do. It's basically sanitizing the system and stripping those restrictions, or something like me as an architect. The Quinn models that we're running are models where those guardrails have been taken off there because we were concerned about that. We don't want there to be some kind of Trojan horse in the system calling back to home or whatever it is.
Well, and I just want to say one thing also to that point, David. I think some of the worry seems misplaced because aren't those systems having to be run on Western systems like AWS? And it's not like they can actually call home?
Well, in theory, look, yeah, it looks like they're not doing that. But okay, so here's the difference. If you're running Quinn on infrastructure in China, or you're running it on Quinn's native routers, not routers, on their servers, etc., you can't do that. But if you're deploying your own version of the model on AWS, you can totally put a different variant on there that has been verified to not have these problems in it. Um, I think for complex. I think what people need to look at, and I'm not trying to go too technical with it, is you want to employ what's called a citadel architecture. Um, Basically, you keep the code base multi-tenant, but you deploy it in single-tenant environments, means only one person can use it there. So your data never cross-pollinates with a potentially um, like a compromised model. So there are ways to do that. By the way, if you need to know about how to do this for your business, I do this kind of work for a living, and I'd love to talk to you about it or nerd
I
out
was just
about
gonna say, I think there's probably a fair segment of listeners who were like, "Well, you say you can do that, but I have no idea what you're talking about."
I'm building firewalls between apartments. You know, like apartment buildings will have like a fire break in between them so that if a fire starts in one apartment, it can't jump over and burn down the next apartment, just that apartment
Right.
burns down. It's in a way, it's kind of like that. I've been thinking about it a lot lately with, I have to give a talk on cybersecurity in like a week, I guess. And I've been thinking about it a lot. I was like, okay, how do I make sure that all this stuff is boiled down for the audience? And I'm not always great at it, but it's something that I do think about how to build it. So maybe a better way to say this is to, maintain uh, agnostic workflows, which that means you don't care which model's running and you test them against each other. So yesterday evening, I was up late and I was comparing the outputs on Quinn to the outputs I was getting from Gemini 3.1 Flash Lite and Grok 4.1. And it turns out, in my case, with the that model that we've double checked and uncensored, we were getting better, just as fast outputs on something we're running on local silicon. Now, it's not a huge difference in costs. It might only cost us $100 a month to run that Grok model or $200 a month to run that Grok model, but I'm running it on our local stack for free. And I know that all our data stays internal to our stack. So I don't have to worry about somebody training on it. So, and that's a big deal for something like in healthcare, or if you have stuff or you're limited by GDPR and you have to keep it on premises and you can't put it out in the cloud. Anyway, neither here nor there, but do expect to hear more about this, more about people trying to ban DeepSeek or what have you. And it's very different than TikTok. You're probably going to hear TikTok said the same thing. Um, with TikTok, we never got access to the algorithm. We knew that China was using a different version of TikTok versus Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok. And I think this is going to bring us to the next article. Um, but the reality is that we never got to look underneath the hood and say exactly how this thing is running. With an open source model, when you get the weights and you get the code base, there's nothing to keep you from investigating every bolt and weld on it. It's not the same thing as TikTok. And you're already hearing people say it under the same guys that they did with TikTok. And it's not the same thing. It's apples and um, paper airplanes. They're not the same thing. They're both things that you can throw, but they have very different outcomes and very different architectures.
How do you think first of all, I wanna know if you wanna take bets on whether or not it'll get labeled as a security risk. But how does that change just the kind of geopolitical environment? There's a lot of stuff going on in the world. And if we're talking about our relationship with China, in a sense, we're kind of I mean, we're in competition with China for in the AI
Sure.
arms. There's a sense of a Cold War kind of brewing kind of thing. But when nations start claiming the other one's technology developments are security risks, how does that affect other conversations, in your
Look,
opinion?
there's a few things to be said here, and I want to go ahead and call it the way it is. I think the talk that's heating up potential conflict with China is a problem, but it's a matter of public record that Chinese espionage has stolen trillions of dollars with a T of capability and technology from American technology companies. You know, for years, Google would not allow Chinese engineers, if you were from mainland China, they would not allow Chinese engineers to get into Google search algorithms in certain places of power within their company. And they got called like all sorts of names about this. And within 6 months of allowing Google Chinese engineers to sit in those roles, China had stolen the very things that Google was like, this is why we didn't do it. And it was like within 6 or 9 months. And then they built their own clone copy of it. So this is absolutely something that goes on. I do think the temperature needs to be brought down a little bit. But the reality of it is, it depends on where you're going to come from with this. If you believe that it doesn't matter, and I heard Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. By the way, the Dwarkash podcast. I don't know if I've ever plugged it on this show. Um,
Oh, David's a huge fan.
I am. I would aspire to be them, right? They literally he does thoughtful, really smart episodes. He's technically very competent, along with one of his roommates runs semi-analysis. I mean, which is like the holy grail for information if you need to buy it about like data center build out and technology and chips and everything else. But he had Jensen on his show, and Jensen's not used to having pushback from a smart guy. And Jensen, like, go watch it. Watch Jensen lose it. By the way, people are real polarized on this. He's like, I didn't wake up yesterday born a loser. It's like the worst. Like it's so it's so bad. Just because um Dorkesh, and I think it's Dorkesh Patel is his name. Dorkesh said, uh, hey, isn't this like them be giving enriched uranium for a nuclear weapons program? And he's like, they're not the same thing. And the reality of it is, no, they kind of are the same thing. Like if you believe that AI represents an existential threat and you could have Terminator and it could destroy all of humanity, then it absolutely is like a nuclear bomb. And if the things that are fuel for said bomb, you don't want to give them to people who might be your potential competitors and enemies. So there's a lot there. I do think I totally recommend you go watch it if you want to see Jensen kind of lose it on a pod. And I found it dishonest. I lost a lot of respect for Jensen. And like, who am I? I mean, what am I? I mean, you've built $1 trillion company. But the reality of it is that every one of these tech individuals, every single one of them is self-serving. He is literally, yeah, he'd love the Chinese market to be open. He would love to go after Hawaii. He'd love to go after these other people and sell his chips into that market. The consequences be damned. He doesn't care. He cares about and that's his job as the CEO of the company. And that's really where he's at. And I think that is incredibly potentially dangerous. And I think you need really thoughtful people in the government talking about this. But I do recommend people go look at that. But I think that you're going to have absolutely the same thing is going to happen here. People are going to shoot back. They're going to say that these Chinese open source models are a risk. There are risks to them, but those risks can be mitigated. They absolutely can be. And for most small, medium businesses, you are going to need a company like ours to help build you the infrastructure to run that stuff on your own silicon because that is achievable, especially if these other things happen and you can't afford the incredible cost to build out this other infrastructure because you can't unless you have the money and that's gonna cause problems. But speaking of China, I'd like to go to our fifth article we want to talk about today. um, this is the thing that Hollywood has been worried about. This is from the New York Times, and it was about how AI is transforming China's entertainment industry. And Jenny, do you want to talk about this? You predicted this, like I don't know, you
Micro
predicted this after
dramas.
2 years
Okay,
ago.
hear me out. You get
By
somebody
the
who's
way, but can I interrupt before you say this? I want the
sure.
audience members to know that Jenny is Virginia is a published artist. She's a very skilled painter. She's done. You went to college for fine art and animation, so she's got a little bit of a creative beef with this anyway. And you've been talking about this for several years about how it's destroying the creative community a bit. So talk about it.
Well, I mean, okay, so it's honestly, it's kind of back and forth. And thank you for the plug. Um, I'm only slightly threatened by AI as a creative human individual, but that's okay. Um, the story is about the story actually is really interesting. It's like David said, kind of the lesson beware for Hollywood. Um, we humans create massive amounts of content, millions of hours on a daily basis are being created for the entertainment economy. That's all of us sitting on our phones scrolling through, etc., consuming this content. And we've had it go from mediums, from books to plays to television to movies, and now it's boiling down to in hand kind of entertainment. So very, very creative people are starting to mass produce these what's called micro dramas. Um, think of them as uh, d- soap operas at 30 to 60 seconds at a time, and you're stacking them up so that the story's being told, and what you're essentially doing is creating a funnel that captures your attention and then traps you in this wonderful little story, and it's all being created with AI. That's not necessarily true. A lot of people are using them in different ways. The article covers a couple of different viewpoints. You've got the creator themselves, you've got a director, and then you've got from a producer standpoint. So you really get to see how the creative side of AI is allowing people to take stories that they want to tell and utilize the technology in a way that allows it to be much more accessible, much more quickly produced, and you're able to create a viable industry around it. So it's really interesting. On the whole, I know AI represents a massive creative threat to individuals and movie makers, or any kind of maker in general. But this article and this segment really covers um, some of the opportunities that it kind of creates as well. And I say that not to ostracize my fellow creatives, but to really look at this and remember that it is a tool. And right now, we are still in very early days of this technology. There's a lot of push and pull. There's a lot of conversation about, do we want it? Don't we want it? Personally, I have a love and hate relationship with it on an ongoing daily basis, so I get it, but it's also when I think about those people that have a story that they want to tell and they haven't had the ability to do so up to this point, I find that incredibly amazing that now this kind of technology is at their fingertips. So take that what you will. I'm sure there's a lot of conversations that are going to be around this kind of topic and article. But that's my rundown of it.
I am very torn on this, and I'm going to put on my human hat for a minute. Um, I think this is absolutely a race to the bottom. So basically, the article is covering the fact that in China, entire film crews are being replaced by these AI models, and what they're doing is for the costs, they've reduced the costs of VFX, scripting, production, the actors, directors, everything. It costs about $30 a minute, and but the resulting kind of slop is facing a massive backlash.
Well, and it is that's the thing. Just just due to volume alone, it's gonna create a ton of slop. And that's the problem, is because within all of that, there are gonna be a few diamonds in there.
I think, and it's just like the thing. That's one of the reasons. Like we get asked, not all the time, but we used to get asked all the time, like, "Can you make my video go viral?" And the answer is, if we
No,
produce enough, something. And no, I mean, if we produce enough content, something will hit and go viral.
there is no formula.
The idea you could predict that on the front end is just ridiculous. So, but I'm going to say something here that's probably maybe a little controversial. I think when content and code generation costs zero, the output becomes worthless. I think competing on AI efficiency alone is a bit of a losing game. I have a whole episode of The Buck Stops Here where I talk about AI efficiency and I give you examples. I think businesses need to use AI strictly for back end efficiency, for things they couldn't do before. I have an episode on AI opportunity. I think there's a ways to do it. But I think that when you really look at your client facing product, I think you need to keep that deeply human and deeply personal. I think it's I one of the things we talked about lately is professional services should get rid of the cents in their pricing. This is just a very basic thing because round numbers signify like premium human driven strategy. Um, you're you're paying for the nuanced, in theory, strategic mind that an algorithm cannot replicate. They can sit and understand your audience. I am saying that the problem with the AI slop is that you have completely removed the human from the process. When you get rid of those human interactions, the human touch points as it is, to race to produce the cheapest possible service imaginable, um, I think is a losing strategy, and I think history will look at that.
Well, sure. I mean, anytime that you're trying to mass produce a bunch of crap content, it's going to be rejected. What I mean, the potential there is for um a different level of creation to happen. And I know this sounds like I'm arguing for it. Honestly, I could go either way because it's
Oh, I love this because that's my
I
seat
can't
normally.
dang it. I know. I know I'm really like, yeah, it's
Well,
terrible.
I'm gonna get some popcorn. Just keep telling me about how we should do this.
Okay. Again, it depends on where you're coming from. If you are just trying to produce a whole bunch of like crap content to just get it out there and run an ads campaign strategy and just siphon people into an entertainment funnel, sure. I mean, there's that stuff exists now. Now you're just able to do it like at scale and in a way that is really, really irritating. You know, that I got pulled into one the other day. I got caught by this poor lady's like signing over paperwork to turn her dog in at the pound. And it's like, oh gosh, this is awful. And I started reading it. And it's like this poor older woman and she had some health problems. I'm like, this is so sad. Meh, guess what? It was a lie. It was all a lie. It was AI. And the thing is like now I'm starting to see more of that pattern come up. So there are ways, and people are definitely creating a bunch of stuff to just get it out there, and try to make some money off of it. But I just I don't wanna discount that there maybe I'm naive, I don't know, but maybe there is that potential for people who really want to be good storytellers and just haven't found their medium yet or haven't found the right medium.
No doubt. I think about using it for efficiency. For example, we have producers of our podcasts. They do color grading. I have yet to meet. By the way, it's a shout out to Caesar and Devin. We love you guys. Thank you so much for all the hard work you do. But um, I have yet to meet a single human on this planet who's just like, you know what I love doing? I love color grading. I was like, if you could replace that with AI, totally do that. I want their brains for
I
those
know a
human
few
pieces that
people.
are what?
I know a few people who are really good at color grading.
They're good at it, but do they love it?
Well,
It's
yeah.
okay. All right. I'd love to hear from you. Please send info at AI the podcast. Send us your resume and say, I love color grading. I would love to read it. Maybe we'll
Every
invite you on the
minute of
show.
every hour, but, yeah. It's about creating something that's, like, good.
Here's the point I want to make. There was an article a few months ago, and it was talking about ads being run completely by AI. And that's the way Meta's pushing things right now. That's where they want to go to it, right? And it turned out that when humans didn't realize it, they actually preferred the AI ads, like by like 10 or 20% over the human created ones. Now, these are human average ads. This is not like the best agency doing stuff. Those ads still always kick the crap out of the AI ads. But an average ad, some guy off the street, because your lawn care guy probably is not an expert in making lawn care ads. Probably not. But compared to their basic ad, which I would expect it to be better than that. But when people found out they were AI generated, it
Oh.
destroyed the credibility and they preferred even the bad human ads by 32%. Now here's the piece I want to take away from this. I talked to a I talked to a client of ours the other day who's doing some of their own Facebook ads, and there were some problems with some of the ads. And I pointed it out, and they're like, "Oh, I'm just messing around and doing this stuff." And I said, "You realize that those are AI generated images of you in those picture?" And I said, the minute that that gets out, you could have destroyed your brand. And I think it's a big deal because here's the thing. I don't believe a single piece of whatever you say. We as an agency try to get authenticity in the video. This is not to permit ourselves. We try to get you to be honest about what you're good at and what you're not good at. There's an angle on this for selling. People don't want, it's like getting catfished. You don't want the company to show up and to not be what you expected, you know?
Well, that goes back to some just solid marketing 101 rules. You are making a promise to your potential audience. You are to fulfill that promise if you choose to make it. Or at least that's how we roll at Catapult. I do wanna say something though. The, um I think it's interesting. I think we are very much still in the discovery phase of what the audience as a whole will tolerate in terms of what's real and what isn't, and where those boundaries kind of are. I think for a large portion of people, it's still kind of a toy. It's like you see a lot of stuff show up on feeds where people follow the trends and they use a prompt and they put that up to represent their business, and they all have, like, these AI images all have a certain look to them. So I think some of that will follow. Um, but it's going to be interesting to see how much tolerance there is for other messages, like how much you're using it to represent your business. Are you creating AI personalities that don't exist within your business and having them represent your business like they're real people or real employees, versus, oh, I'm just using some pictures, versus, oh my gosh, we're getting conflicting news articles about what happened or didn't happen in the world, and over time people just get tired of that stuff and turn away from it. So I think we're still learning where those boundaries are with a lot of this. But it's going to be it's going to be that creative industry that's always on the frontier of this, because people are always going to be trying to entertain people and pushing the envelope of what they can do and what is interesting in our current environment where we are competing. Everything is competing for your attention all the time. What is it that AI can capture and hook? So, I don't know, food for thought.
Well, I think that's a pretty good place to end this pod. I think we've covered a lot. We covered some articles this week that I think are important for you to understand how this landscape is changing. And it's going to keep changing at an accelerated pace. My takeaway advice from this episode would be to always protect your foundation first. Really think about building your frameworks agnostically so you're not tied into one vendor or one provider. Because if OpenAI jumps the price, um,
17 times.
yeah, what's that? Yeah, 27 times if it's GitHub, right? But the reality of it is, at least have that. Keep your sensitive business data secure in a vault. Don't put that in the machines if you can avoid it. And stay adaptable because there will be regulations coming. And as they roll out, tune into this podcast and we'll try to cover that for you and maybe give you a roadmap to help navigate.
Yep. And remember, while the technology is changing rapidly, the core of your business, it remains human connection. AI is here to augment your imagination, but not replace your relationships. So if you want to talk strategy, or you want to figure out how to implement these systems safely in your own business and in a way that doesn't alienate your current team, reach out to our team. We're happy to help.
I really like that. Augment your imagination.
Yeah. I'm telling you, at its core, it's almost like magic. It's just there's so much potential for destruction and disruption, which I guess kind of like magic is the same way. So,
What is it?
anyway,
There's a famous line that's the future is always the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed yet.
ah, ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah. But I do like augment the imagination. We need a tagline for the show. By the way, if you like the show and enjoyed it, please send us a comment. Tell us what you think the tagline for the show would be. And if you really enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share that with your professional network so we can keep these episodes coming to you and keeping the conversation honest, human focused, but technology forward.
All right. For AI the podcast, I'm Virginia Hewling.
And I'm David Maples.
Y'all take care of each other out there.
Bye.
That's a wrap for this episode of AI the podcast. To make sure you never miss an update on the future of tech and business, hit that like and subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. This show is made possible by the support of listeners like you. So if you want to help us grow this community, drop us a 5-star rating. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.